Hi, I'm Tarik Husain, and welcome to Hong Kong. We're here today at the FinTech Finals, and what an interesting time, of course, in banking when we see what's happening around a lot of startups, a lot of really interesting technology. But I think that's really been driven by the customer demand, and I think that's what we're seeing in the marketplace as Oracle. We're seeing that the customer is driving a lot of this change. The banks, of course, have had to change based on that, but more importantly, I think there's a fundamental shift in the way banks are realizing that how do I service my customer? And a lot of banks are moving away from the traditional product out, i.e. what product, what mortgage product, what loan product, what credit product, etc. do I sell the customer, to a much more customer-centric, customer-in service. How do I service a customer? I talked on stage yesterday about the example of me having a platinum card and the bank trying to sell me a black card. There's really no advantage for me having a different color card. There's really an advantage for me having a card that gives me more benefits and services me better. So we're seeing a big shift of the banks looking at that. Obviously the challenge for a lot of the banks is not just the front end, it's not just about the app and the tablets, it's really about how do you digitize a lot of the processes in the back end. I think when you look at what Oracle brings to the table, it's really about focusing on that larger part of the challenge in a digital bank, and that's the back end that enables the front end. There's actually a lot of customers we've seen that have built beautiful front end looking applications, but ultimately still have to print out a form, move it around several departments. And that really goes to the challenge of a lot of the banks in the region of changing the mindset of the bank and the bankers in particular that are used to doing the same thing the same way. Most banks move from, most bankers move from one bank to the other, and if I'm an auditor in a bank, I move from bank X to bank Y. Typically my job function's fairly similar, 3 or 5% difference in what I did at bank X over bank Y. And what you really need to do as a bank is you need to look at exactly what is it I've been doing and how can I actually improve that and make that a better process and a better, more digitized process. If you could digitize a lot of the back end process, then of course you can enable those front end changes that the customer is really demanding. There's some really great advantages as well, and some great case studies we see out there. If I take one of the banks in Japan we've worked with, they're servicing 1.9 million customers with just 180 bank staff, and I think that's a real testament to what a digital bank looks like for us. It's enabling all of the back-end process to be digitized as much as possible, and then that's servicing the customer in the front end. We're seeing that happen as well in a lot of the move towards robots and chatbots and all these things you're seeing, because ultimately at the end of the day, a lot of the questions that a bank gets, a lot of the challenges that a bank gets can be answered by automation. I think, I was kind of joking on stage yesterday that if you've ever spoke to your bank, you're pretty much a lot of the time speaking to a robot anyway, because even the human interaction, the person is typically going to have a very scripted, very sort of checklist type response to what you've asked. Is it possible for me to do X? And typically the bank office is very restricted on how to respond to that and says yes or no, and follows a very, very set procedure. So we're seeing a lot of the procedures need to change, a lot of the mindset definitely needs to change, and that's where I think the digitalization of the back office is as important, if not more important, in many of our customers to enable that front end office transformation. Ultimately, it's about adding value to the customer. We're seeing a lot of new banks come up, and a lot of banks having to change to sort of open standards. The UK's now gone to a full open standard. Thailand has an open API standard. And really what that means for a lot of banks is you'll end up being a commodity bank. And I can switch banks as quickly as I'd switch a mobile operator today, where in my case I land in a country and I pick whatever SIM card offers me the best at that time. I think a lot of banks, unless they start really adding value to the customer, will go and be nothing more than a commodity service provider. And value really is different for different people. I think it's knowing your customer and knowing what value makes sense to that customer at that given time. So we're seeing a lot of trend towards, real-time offers. I landed in Hong Kong a couple of days ago. What's the best currency conversion I can get? What about travel insurance for where I'm flying to next, etc. So that customer-centric approach is what we see a lot of the fintechs, of course, focus on, but the banks are now really raking up to how do I do this better? How do I service my customer? Because unless I provide a value of that service to my customer and not a product-led sale, then really you're going to end up with customers moving along to a lot of the new neo-banks, the smaller banks, and the challenger banks that we're seeing coming out in the market. So it's an exciting time. I think in the 20 years I've been in banking, this is probably the most transformational I've seen. There is challenges for a lot of the banks to change, but in general, the customer is driving that. The SME customer, the corporate customer and the retail customer all making this drive. And it's a great time as well to include new people into the financial services business. We're seeing a lot of new people coming in that were underserviced before because frankly, the technology didn't allow you to enable financial services to every single person on the planet. Literally it does today. I think the mobile devices means I have access to every single person. Every single person can actually then be serviced by that. That lowers the cost for you as a bank of servicing that customer, and ultimately, of course, then generates a new number of people into the banking platform. So great time. Looking forward to more of these, and thanks for listening.